r/nosleep. Posted by you/first. Breath 1. I answered a spam call. Hello, is this Mr. Henderson? There was no real reason for me to pick up the phone. The spam app on my cell called out the mystery number right away. But, hell, I thought. Fuck it. There was no one else left in life for me to talk to. Even a debt collector sounded good at the moment. My wife was murdered in 2015. There really isn't an easy way to say that other than getting it out of the way early. It was a random robbery gone wrong. One rainy night, some sick tweaking fuck snuck into our house and shot her. The suspect was caught, 2 days later, and sentenced to life in prison. He still sits there today. I have worked in web development ever since. The job is remote, and the field caters to my hermit-like behavior out here in the woods of northern New Jersey. The lack of drug testing is really just an added benefit. I was perfectly free to fuck up the remainder of my own life. I don't have any friends, anymore. Not really. Sometimes. I guess it is easy to look for companionship in all the wrong places. Senior or junior? I replied to the lady with a sigh before settling into the armchair in my office with a bottle of wine. It was raining that night. The wind whipped the old pine tree in our backyard so hard I thought it might topple. Senior, said the pretty, calm voice on the other line. She sounded familiar, but I blamed that notion on the half-empty bottle of wine. Apologies, ma'am, but Senior died 6 years ago, I said, a little annoyed at the lack of record keeping at this place. She paused. Oh gosh. Gosh, that is not what we have here. I am so sorry, sir. We were not aware. Please forgive the intrusion and assumption. Would you mind pausing while I check my records? A filing cabinet clicked steadily in the background as static crinkled. My guess was that the woman held the receiver to her shoulder. I chuckled a bit at the lack of audio quality. No, that is okay, no problem at all. No worries. Why don't you start by telling me your name? I asked, cursing myself for the hint of shameless flirting at the end. She giggled. Something about that laugh was very familiar. My name is Emily, and I work with his credit card company, she said in a rehearsed tone. Unfortunately, we cannot divulge which firm over the phone if you are not on the account. Which, you just admitted yourself, of course. Okay. I am guessing that you are Mr. Henderson's son, she mumbled while audibly thumbing through papers. Yes ma'am, that's right. But it's been years. I could not possibly be stuck with the old man's debt, right? I asked hopefully. Well, let's check, shall we? There was a panicked shuffling and opening of books in the background. I am so sorry, sir, she replied with a regretful tone. The rules are in one of those 3-ring binders, and they are very difficult to find. Please hold for a moment. That's okay. Did not know anybody still kept records that way. Do I get an email confirmation of this charge as well? I asked. Excuse me? Email. Like. Electronic mail. A confirmation of the charge? I asked again, allowing my confusion to turn to frustration. What was this lady's problem? We don't do that here. Still a few years away from all those fancy features, she continued. But as you know, late payments are a pretty serious issue. They can even affect the credit score of an individual when a large amount has not been paid. Okay, of course, I said, genuinely starting to grow worried and a bit flustered. What can I do? Is there a Mrs. Henderson in the household? She asked quietly. Mrs. Henderson died in 2006. What year did you say? Oh my gosh. That is so horrible. I really am batting 1,000 today. I gasped. That was it. That phrase. I don't know if it was the way she said it, or the fact that simply not that many people use that exact language. But as soon as she did, something clicked in my memory. My wife worked for a credit card company, before we met. Her name was also Emily. The voice sounded like hers. But it was younger. More hopeful than I remembered. What is your last name? I asked. The line was silent. Look, I know that's a weird question. But please, I think we know each other. I can't give that information out. She started. Okay. Did you go to Jefferson Memorial High School? Yes, she said, astonished. How did you know that? It was impossible. Emily was dead. The voice on the phone barely even sounded like her. It was younger, happier, more optimistic. This type of dream was actually the type of thing that had kept me up a million sleepless nights in the past. And yet, I was awake. Could it be a coincidence? Is your mother's name Eva? There was silence on the other end of the line. Then her mouse-like reply confirmed my suspicions. Who is this? I took a deep breath. Either I understood what was happening, or I lost my mind. Might as well enjoy the ride. This next question is going to sound strange. What is today's date? I am sorry, sir. What? One moment. She paused and shuffled around some more papers. Today's date is July 9th, 1999. It was impossible. Could it be the storm? The anniversary of her death? Emily, listen to me. Okay, sir, this conversation is getting a little strange. Let's keep it to the payment plan. Listen to me very carefully. One day you are going to meet a man. You are going to love him, Emily. And he will love you more than you ever know. I had to give her something to remember. On your first holiday together, he will buy you one gift for all 12 days of Christmas. Sounds dreamy, she replied with a laugh and a sigh. Are you one of those psychics? I am serious. You will marry this man, Emily. He will buy you the ring you always wanted. The ceremony will be in a beautiful one in your hometown. Your entire family will be there, including Aunt Zelda and your grandma from Tennessee. I like this fortune cookie, she said with dripping sarcasm. But 2 years later, on July 9, 2015, you will be murdered in the home you share together. She shifted the phone nervously. So what do I do? First, I tried to tell her to avoid the house that day. To never date me, to stay away forever and find a better life somewhere else. But somewhere in the middle of my rant, the line disconnected to the tune of a blood-curdling scream. I called back to find a non-working number. She never answered again. I fell asleep listening to the thunder rolling through the sky. The scream from that night repeated from time to time while flashes of her body on the floor occasionally invaded my mind. I never questioned the call. I never asked why. Maybe it was God, maybe it was just time. But yesterday morning, when I woke up, Emily was by my side. Posted by you/first, breath 1. I lost my dog. Alert. My wife, Emily, and I were playing with Lola at 4 p.m. last night. Our neighbors lit some fireworks in the street in front of the house. She got scared and hopped the fence in our backyard. We have not seen her since. Lola is a beautiful 1-year-old German Shepherd with traditional red-black coloring. She is our baby and a big girl, about 60 to 70 pounds, but very well trained and approachable. If anyone has seen her, we are offering a $500 reward to folks with information that leads to her return. I know. The reward was a bit much. Even the post itself sounded overly dramatic to my brother. But, hey! Dogs become a part of your family. We rescued our girl from a horrible barn stall in deplorable conditions. She was malnourished and riddled with worms. Nursing her back to health was a challenge. But she was a champion through the whole thing. The running joke that Lola was the daughter I never had was not so much a joke anymore. The first day and night was nauseating. Several good Samaritans reached out and offered to help in the search through town. We stayed together until 2 a.m. but had no luck. It was awful trying to sleep. I looked at the bed every hour and expected to find a dog warming up my feet. The following morning was a little more fruitful. My brother-in-law is a technology guru, and he offered to share pictures of our pup on several new apps. Around late afternoon, he got a hit and forwarded me the informant's information. Lost and Foundolf, I found your dog in the city square. Here is the picture of him. Me, oh my god, really? That is amazing. It is actually a she. This looks like the picture we sent out. Can you take a picture of her now? Lost and Foundolf, my camera does not work. I have your dog. I dressed her up in a blue dress to keep her warm. Maybe she will like my pink one better. That response, along with the username, was strange enough to make me suspicious. I hesitated to reply, and Loft took the opportunity to talk a little more. Lost and Foundolf, the amount is not enough. I want $1,000. Again, I know. But we were desperate. Me, why is she wearing a dress? We will see what we can do. Is there any way you can prove you have her? Lost and Foundolf, yes, I will bring her to your address. 114 Middle Drive. Midnight. By the mailbox. I'll be the leopard, you'll see. Who the fuck asks to meet in the middle of the night? Why is he a leopard? I just wanted my pup. Me, can you do it any earlier? Lost and Foundolf, no. I have work. Okay was all I said. The hours crept on endlessly. Emily cried in the bedroom throughout most of the night. It broke my heart. This mystery weirdo was our last good shot. We had already wasted time on him. I felt like an idiot. At 11:55, we got a text from Lost and Found and went to wait outside. Be there in 5. Okay, I replied. I want a pair of you wife's panties, too. Before I could tell the guy to fuck off, we saw the white blur of headlights drift down our remote street. A white paneled van stopped silently in front of the mailbox. As the door opened slowly, I told Emily to hide in the shed. The man who stepped out was disheveled. Garbage fell from the door of his car as he stumbled forward in a mess. His face was covered by a black mask. Before I could offer up another word, he coughed out a choked sentence marred by what sounded like years of Marlboro Lights. Do you have the money? He asked. Do you have my dog? Why the fuck are you wearing a mask? Why are you texting me weird things? I was shouting. He was not going to come to my house and intimidate me. If this was a prank, it was a sick one, and somebody needed to put this idiot in his place. Matt! My wife shouted from a distance. Stay inside. I screamed. The next few seconds were so swift my mind never had time to catch up. The man hit me with a cheap shot. He brought a bat or something with him. As soon as I fell to the floor, I saw stars and smelled the stinking stale alcohol on his breath as he rifled through my pockets. Come on. Where's the fucking money, you bitch? He whispered. You think I won't kill you and your fucking whore wife over $1,000? Nobody lives out here. Nobody saw my face. Maybe I'll just step inside when I'm done. You know. To see if there's anything else in there for me to play with. I spit in his face. The man hit me again, harder. At a certain point, the pain was immeasurable and beyond comprehension. But, I could still hear things. I could hear my wife screaming and crying. I could hear the sound of my bones breaking in parts of my face and ribs that I never knew existed. And then, I heard barks. The owner of that voice was angry. It snarled and growled as it launched itself forward. Something large sprinted to my side and skidded to a stop beside me. I know it was real because the man started to scream. The rips of flesh and breaking of bones were no longer my own. Warm, comforting arms lifted up my arms under my shoulders. Guard, Lola, my wife said. But it all felt like a dream. I lost consciousness soon after. Emily got us inside, where she locked the door and waited for the police to arrive. The masked man tried to get up and run to his car a few times. Lola made sure he didn't. She ripped off an ear in the struggle, and mauled both legs. He was easily arrested by officers, a few minutes later, on assault charges. His crimes and prior convictions ranged from harassment to sexual assault, dating back to 1979. Lola was never missing. She was locked in the shed the whole damn time. Posted by you/first. Breath 1. My Disney cruise cabin had a man in the mirror. A cruise ship should be considered a protected place. I don't think that is an unreasonable expectation from the Fortune 500 company you are trusting with your family's safety. It sure as hell was not cheap. The vacation was a 3-night celebration of my father's 80th birthday. All 14 kids and grandkids were convened. That prospect alone was a reminder in why some families should stay away outside the holidays. But Dad insisted we all keep the peace. It's only 3 days. He wheezed that line the entire time we were checking in. The old man did pay for the whole thing himself. My brother's perfect wives and brood of beautiful babies made the trip all the more complicated. Shuffling around the ship in the soul-sucking heat was about as much a struggle as satisfying 7 cousins under age 7. 3 for Steve and Shayna, 3 for Sean and Cynthia, and finally my 4-year-old son, Jack, and wife, Emily. We were free to do as we pleased for the entirety of the journey. There was only one condition. Each night at 6 we were required to meet at the only formal restaurant on board. The ship steamed off the port sometime around 5 the first night, and after drinks on deck we rushed down to the cabin to get ready for dinner. Em was washing Jack in the shower when I saw the man in the mirror for the first time. Honestly, I was not paying much attention to my reflection. My eyes were down at my tie, struggling through the not memorized since grade 5. But when I looked up, there he was, staring back from the corner on the right side. You know when, in movies or music videos, the shape of a man's face appears in the corner of the screen and sings along to whatever background is showing? It was the same kind of thing. The only portion of the man that was visible was his head. He was my age, with a long caterpillar mustache and clean-shaven sideburns hidden under a wide brim hat. The beginnings of an old-fashioned 3-piece suit poked out from the bottom of his shadowy frame. When I stepped back in shock, he looked just as surprised. When I shouted for my wife, his mouth opened side by side. I darted out of the reflection of the mirror and jumped on the bed like a child just as Emily came stamping out of the shower, half naked and annoyed. What? What are you yelling about? Emily asked. I pointed. Why did you yell? She repeated. There was a man in the mirror, I replied quietly. Emily took a hard look at it. Then another long look at me. In a few seconds, she threw up her still wet hands and let them fall at her side. What are you talking about? You saw a character? No, there was a man in that mirror. I saw him. I hopped back up and walked towards them. But the only thing looking back through the glass was our collected confusion. Must have been one of those smart mirror things. I muttered. Can we go to dinner now? Em asked after turning on the blow dryer. We did. The meal was uneventful. Steve and Sean argued about the most effective way to steer around storms. Their kids complained, and Emily's seasickness steadily got worse with the rocking waves. Jack was about the happiest camper in the whole crew with his broccoli stew. Sleep came easily early that night. The steward forgot to give an extra bed, so all three of us were crammed into one. The lapping waves were reassuring at first, but I prepared myself for a sick wife and 4-year-old the following morning. I was right. Emily and Jack spent most of the day throwing up in the shower. I went outside to get some fresh air for a half hour, and came back at 5 to find Jack ready to roll. Em had finally fallen asleep. The first words out of his mouth when I opened the door were, "Daddy." The man in the mirror was back. He talked to me this time. He talked? What did he say, Jack? I asked. My son giggled. He didn't actually talk, but his lips moved and I know what they said. What did he say? I repeated while walking over to the phone in our room. Get away, he giggled, again. Get away, he was more serious this time. Get away. My son screamed the last part, so loud he woke Em up. Then he raised his arms over his head in a foreboding way. That made my fingers dart across the numbers much quicker. Hello, yes, operator. Do you have men in your mirrors? I realized how bizarre the question sounded as soon as it came out of my lips. My wife rolled over in bed and gave an exhausted look towards my panicked tone. This again? She asked. The operator gave an awkward pause, then replied. No, sir, we do not have any men in our mirrors. Could it be like a character from the movies or something? I asked hopefully. No sir. There are no men in our mirrors. I thanked her and hung up the phone, unsure what to do next. Then I checked my watch. Okay, we gotta go to dinner. Can you make it, Em? She nodded and started to pull on her pants from earlier in the day. I shuffled through the motions of getting Jack ready, all the while keeping an eye on the strange mirror in the hallway. There was nothing plugged into it. The glass was set sturdily in wood without any cracks or blemishes. There was absolutely nothing strange about the thing at all, so I decided to put it out of my mind. At dinner, I tried to find a way to bring it up gracefully. I failed. Anyone having weird issues with the mirror in their cabin? Steve chuckled. You would be the one to have a mirror problem on vacation. Sean choked on his water. There was a lot of laughter around the table at that one. Even Emily joined in between chugs of her cold water. My face turned red. No, it's not just me. Jack and I saw a man in the mirror the past 2 nights. I thought it was one of those smart things, but the receptionist says they don't even have them. Sean got up and started to moonwalk. I'm starting with the man in the mirror. Everyone was hysterical at that one. You would think they had never heard a Michael Jackson joke. My father was pounding the table while Steve's wife was wiping tears. Even the little kids were giggling and pointing at me and my son. Whatever, forget it, I added nonchalantly. The second night's sleep was a lot worse than the first. The idiotic captain assured over the loudspeaker that it would be another rough night at seas. Clothes hangers in the closet shifted back and forth recklessly while rain pounded at the sliding door to our deck. Emily had to get up several times to vomit, and Jack was physically shaking underneath our sheets. When the dawn came, we were relieved to see clear skies and calm seas. Our final day at sea was a return trip to port. There was no real destination of our cruise. The only island visit had been cancelled due to bad weather. The cruise line gave us $100 credit to ease the pain. I used most of it in the casinos while Jack and Emily enjoyed their only healthy time on deck soaking up the sun. That night at the dinner table I kept my mouth shut. The families argued about politics and sports, or the best wine to pick, with my father presiding over the whole thing like a judge. My mind was stuck on the paradox of the man in the mirror, and what the hell could actually be done about it. Eventually, we called it quits and headed back to the cabins with a plan to pack and disembark early. When we got to the room, Jack darted into the bathroom to empty the remains of his horrible 3-day diet. That was good. He never saw what came next. The lights were out. I struggled with the switch for a few minutes while Emily slipped out of her dress. She looked beautiful. Her slim features were illuminated by the wind pushing through the open blinds. I stepped forward and wrapped my arms around her waist, pulling her back as I kissed her neck softly. I turned my head to the left to see our dazed reflection in the cool glass mirror. But it wasn't us looking back. The man took up the entire frame. His neck was redder than the shade of Emily's underwear. There was a slit at the center of it, and I could see the bones and muscles that comprised his throat. His mouth was somehow still open and gaping like a trout. His lips suggested the same soundless song my son said he saw. Get away. Em saw too. We both screamed at the same time. Seemingly in response, the man's face grew serious. His neck realigned in a sickening display. A black-gloved hand peeked rose from the corner and pointed to the right. A shape rose out of our still-made bedsheets. Emily whimpered by my side. I reached for the door exiting our cabin and found it locked from the inside. In a swift motion, the sheets fell from the shape, and a man sat up from the bed and placed his 2 feet to the side like we had disturbed his sleep. Then he stood. He was tall. That was evident when his head almost hit the ceiling. But he was old, with white whiskey hair and a faded crewman jacket. You're not supposed to scream until you get in bed with me, he offered in a raspy voice that made him cough afterwards. Emily gasped out loud. He took a few steps forward and his outline became more clear. The man had white paper skin that cracked and crackled at every corner. But he moved surprisingly well for his age. He put his hands in his pockets and contemplated us. Then he started whistling softly as he tapped his tattered boots. I shoved my arms in front of my wife and the bathroom door. Oh. Is little Jackie taking a little shit? The man asked, inching closer playfully. He's had some real nasty shits this weekend. And I have smelled all the shits on this ship, he chuckled. Nasty little shitter, that one. I heard my son whimper from the bathroom. After taking another step forward, the man paused in front of the mirror contemplatively. His confidence ran away in moments, and he dropped the fine rolled-up line of rope held in his hand. You? He asked his reflection. The hesitation was enough for my wife to reach out with a startlingly quick kick to the groin. In seconds the old asshole was on the ground and she was hovering over him. Still in her panties, my warrior wife landed another swift kick to his head that left him unconscious. I grabbed the key ring sitting on his waist. We grabbed Jack and tumbled out into the open hallway. Emily and I carried our screaming son up 4 floors to reception. Every door was opened as we passed. The crime was reported immediately and the perpetrator was arrested in our room in connection to our case and several others like it. What I did not say was the man in the mirror that provided the warning. I saw him smiling just before he faded away. Posted by you/first. Breath 1. I was deeply depressed before the better way. The state murdered my family mercilessly on May 2, 2017. You read that right, the American government is responsible for the deaths of my beautiful wife and our baby boy, Ben. It happened on a Sunday morning. Emily, a sweet saint and my soulmate of 10 years, had slipped out to the grocery store to pick up the morning bagels as a surprise. 2 salt with butter, 1 egg with cream cheese. The salt was mine, and she used to tease about the calories constantly. Em wasn't wrong, everyone could see. My days in the army were long behind me, and raising Ben had stacked on 5 years' worth of waste in my growing waist. They didn't even do anything wrong, was the thing. Em had called from the road that morning. Her and Ben were giggling like idiots. They were singing to the song on the radio, some top 40s hit whose name eludes me even on the darkest days. She called it her telephone wake-up call. The cell phone was hands-free. She followed all the rules of the road. Em was a good driver. When the light changed, our extra-safe Subaru Forester set through the intersection as expected. That is all on camera. But Emily never saw the police car with his siren on. She was never prepared for the shit show that followed. The collision was head-on from the driver's side. I heard my wife's dying screams through the unaffected onboard audio. Ben died instantly and Emily never made it out of the ambulance. Police officer Gary claimed to have had high beams on from a mile away. There were no street cameras that far back, and no witnesses there to verify his claim. Good old Gare was gone on a 12-hour shift at the time, in the shit part of town. Lord knows how bad his vision was. Lord knows he never hit the brakes. He was suspended, but never charged. And so, I thought about murdering him. See, the thing was that I had the arsenal. I had the training. With a dead family, there was no reason or will to work. I quit my job at the firm after a week and never left our haunted little house. Groceries were delivered with the pot. I kept myself in a stone stupor for the better part of the winter, and the only thing that kept my mind off mayhem and massacres were pictures. They were neatly aligned above the desk in our attic. My family encompassed the majority of the makeshift motif. Ben was an adorable bundle of curls and bad behavior from the moment he was born. But Emily was jaw-dropping from our first moment until the last. You know, the type of missus that truly never needed makeup? She was 30 years old and maintained every bit of her beauty after Ben's birth. Em's brown hair was always kept up in a neat ponytail, and she had 3 neat freckles that speckled right underneath her light green eyes. Gary's picture was on the wall too. Below the rest, to the right, in a red circle next to the video footage. The photo was an old one, from back when Gary was a new trooper on the force. He was handsome then. With a thin mustache and bushy eyebrows that matched a curly mop of red hair on top. Sometimes I watch him in his bedroom. The man hardly matches the monument. There are 3 cameras. Netgear Arlos were the brand, if you must know. The base station is located in his garage, and 3 wire frees are discreetly hidden throughout the house. Every night, for the past year. When I am all alone with my shitty stories in this sub and a bottle of brandy. I watch them all like a sadly tuned sitcom. The family sits down to dinner at 6 sharp. His straightly laced children are neatly dressed every evening. Any exceptions are not tolerated and strictly disciplined. Gary's eldest, Bill, is 17 and homosexual. Even if dad is in denial, his little sister, Sylvia, and mother, Steph, are quite supportive. When Pops is away from the table some evenings, they whisper to Bill about the bars and boyfriends he's meeting in high school. One night last week, Bill says he is going to bring a friend by. The boy's name is Jeremy, he is 16 and dresses a little different from Bill and the boys he usually associates with. Gary greets him at the door and gets him inside. They shake hands, and there is a salty seeming warmth there that only 720p can display. Like a coward, Gary waits until the boy's back is turned and the front door is closed before he pulls the belt from its loop and wraps it around Jeremy's throat. There are screams. Lots of screams. Billy tries to intervene. Sylvia and Steph are so shocked that they cower like scattered chickens in the corner. Bill is a strong boy. He has worked out at the gym for months to make the basketball team. But his father is bigger. Even with an arm holding the belt around Jeremy like a noose, he beats his helpless son into a horrible submission that ends, sadly, on the rugged corner of the kitchen table. Both boys are dead. Gary buries them in the backyard while his paralytic wife and daughter watch from the bay window. And now 4 gory bodies have made geriatric Gare a serial killer. I was ready to murder him. The plan was simple. My shed was stocked with assault rifles and enough artillery to blow him to hell a few years early. He would be alone that night. Steph had managed to take Sylvia to her mom's in Sacramento for a few days. It was for the best, they all said. I knew his wife still loved him. It was an accident, she repeated in the bathroom mirror when nobody else looked. Gary still needed time to clean up the crime scene and soon the missing boy would be citywide news. The proper steps must be taken. A trip to see grandma could never be suspicious. It was time to make my move. I licked my lips 3 times when I got out of the car on June the 6th. Em always told Ben to never lick his lips. She said if he did, the birthmarks on his face would get bigger and bigger. Ben always hated his birthmarks. Gary was alone in his cabin. Same as every night that week. Sometimes he would stare out the window, or at the 60-inch smart TV in his study. Most nights he would get fucked up enough to pass out and shit the sofa. The situation was unfortunately the latter when I watched his video feed from the smartphone in my van. The walkway was quiet and windy. I guessed a storm coming, but the sky seemed clear. I savored the sweetness of my first succulent taste at revenge. Gary would be the first, but would be the last? I could slaughter all of them. The cop, the judge, the lawyers. Even the fucking traffic light sitting above Staten Street could have victim to every inch of sadness I felt when seeing my wife's sweet face sitting alone in the attic. And how surprised was I, when out of the corner of my eye, I spotted a man with a wide-brimmed hat and neat black tie. There was a child beside him. The boy could not have been more than 13, or 14, but he had a devilish grin on his face that made me shift the rifle in my hands uncomfortably. Neither of these freaks seemed to mind the fact that I was armed. They approached like 2 tourists out on an evening hike. In the middle of my murderous madness, the cockiness made them strangely admirable. "Allow us to handle this one for you, sir," the man said, his voice slipped through still lips like a serpent. He then nodded to the child beside him. The boy ran up to Gary's door like a good soldier and knocked 3 times. "We have taught them to do this on their own, now. I want to see how he does," the man said with a sickly smile, as if discussing the child's homework assignment. I was dumbfounded. Unsure of what to say and rooted to the perfect green grass below my feet. Gary answered the door with shit still dripping from his overalls. There was no shame in the sad fuck. I would have laughed if not for the shock. The boy covered his nose briefly, but the man beside me tapped his clipboard angrily and gestured to the sky, with one index finger still in the air. The last words out of Gary's foul little mouth were, "What the fuck?" before a pen drove into his eyeball. A clipboard flowed swiftly behind to drive the point further in Gary's brain, and soon the haughty boy was on top of him like a hungry animal. His teeth were razor-sharp slits that pierced through skin and sinew as if it were deli meat. If it were anyone else, my instinct would be to vomit on the spot. But there was something strangely satisfying in Gary Smith's suffering. The man turned to me, clearly annoyed but set on the business at hand. He handed me a card, printed on fine paper with proper block stencil lettering. He didn't quite do it right, but they are learning, aren't they? Such impressive students. Thankfully there are no witnesses. He gestured to the empty woods around us. Please, see my card, and if you find no other use for that copious talent, consider seeing our corporate office. Without another word, he trotted down the walkway to the house, and slammed the front door. He seemed ready to join his small companion. I got in my car and drove away, uninterested in what happened next. The job was done. Truthfully, I am thankful for it. I did not call Ray from Better Way TM yesterday, but I think I may today.